I think, yeah, ding, ding, ding. I think most of you know me. I'm Bob Parrott. I thought about it and realized, gee, I've lived here 3.5 years already, which blew my mind to think of. It sure didn't seem that long, but yeah, 3.5 years. Okay. And if you saw my note, I've been involved with Project Lifesaver for 20 years, so I could talk for days. So my challenge is squeezing it down to what would make sense for you and not too much time here. So I guess the first question to ask is, what is Project Lifesaver? So Project Lifesaver is a system to rapidly locate individuals that are vulnerable due to cognitive conditions that cause them to have a tendency to wander off or bolt and run or just become confused and become lost in a previously familiar location. And that puts themselves at risk. So I emphasize the word system here. We're going to talk about hardware and equipment, but it's way more than just the equipment. There are other companies that use the same equipment that don't have the 100% track record that Project Lifesaver has, because they have policies, procedures, and training that far exceed the others. And so far in 26.5 years, they've had a 100% success record, even though they're in all 50 states and a couple other countries. So to have 100% success, and there's no guarantee that that'll continue, but 100% success in that amount of time with many, many, many thousands of clients is saying a lot. Okay, so right here. Typical clients. Not everybody with these diagnoses is a candidate, but some of those with Alzheimer's, which we tend to have more common knowledge of, people with some form of dementia. My wife's dementia started, let's see, February of 2016 when she slipped and fell on ice at the end of a timeshare visit, knocked herself out, had a traumatic brain injury, and that was the beginning of her dementia. In fact, I'm supposed to be at that same timeshare 4 o'clock today, but won't be there till tomorrow. But anyway, not everyone with Alzheimer's or dementia is at risk of wandering off. But when you think about those that lose their short-term memory, they may forget that they've been retired for 15 years and they've worked their whole life. They got to get back to work. Or their pet that they've had for so long, they forget that died 3 or 4 years ago. They go out to look for it. And they don't necessarily dress appropriately for the weather. So they're at risk. And all kinds of other stories that you hear that people have to get out. Okay, another typical client is with autism. By the way, Alzheimer's was the reason Project Lifesaver was started in April of '99 by a search and rescue group that was frustrated over finding the body of an Alzheimer patient not many yards from where they left. And maybe they had to wait for the snow to melt or whatever, but it frustrated them, and that's why it started. So it was really focused on Alzheimer's and dementia. Families with someone that has autism said, hey, this will work for us too. And now actually the majority of our clients are those with autism. We still have a lot with dementia. But autism is a big spectrum. There's some very high functioning people with autism that are Asperger's, savants, and then there's very low functioning on the other extreme where they're nonverbal and have a real tough time with getting along in life. So some of those on the spectrum are potential candidates to be a client. Down syndrome is another diagnosis that often is a candidate. They often get focused on something and like could be boats, and they're gonna go look for boats or pizza or you name it, and they get tunnel vision, and that's what they're after, and they take off and start looking for whatever they're after. Okay, stroke can also lead to these challenges where they'd be a candidate. And there are other things, traumatic brain injury I mentioned, and etc. One of our clients was someone who was a hydrocephalic, and he would have strokes and other things that happened to his brain, and he would take off, and we'd have to go find him. So, okay, so that's kind of how the client side works. Now, how does Project Lifesaver work? Well, the clients wear a transmitter like this, sealed on their wrist or ankle, and the bands that put them on, there's different types of bands, but they're all really tough. They're sealed on. The way you get them off is you have to cut the band, and you have to take them off every other month to change the battery in there. Because these transmitters are sending out a pulse about once a second. In fact, if I turn this up. Okay, so this is sending out a pulse about once a second. And when you're pointing at it, you get a stronger signal. When you're not, it's weaker. This is old bear tracking technology. It's radio transmitters. People say, well, it's GPS, right? No, because GPS does not work everywhere. GPS could get you to a building, and if it's a 40-story building, where might they be in that building? Or the Mall of America. I think there's as many floors below ground at the Mall of America as there are above. So lots of places to hide. So I can pass this around. I should see what that's like. Okay, so they wear it 24/7 because you never know when they're going to take off. And one of the characteristics of those with autism is their senses are heightened, typically, in that their sense of touch is heightened. You don't want to grab somebody with autism because that can really bother them. Putting something like that bracelet on them can be a challenge, and because you're adding something. In fact, as a kid, they often don't want to wear clothes because it's way too irritating. So it takes a while to get a kid conditioned to keeping clothes on. One of our clients, the mother said that, well, as soon as her daughter got home from school, her clothes are off. She just could not stand them on because they're hypersensitive. They're also hypersensitive to sounds. So when I train public safety agencies on it, I warn them if they're looking for someone with autism, if they're getting close to the last known location, turn off code 3, turn off your lights and siren. Don't want the siren sounds because they'll run from it. That's so irritating, they'll run from it. And the bright lights, they don't like that either. So it's a challenge to understand that. So a big part of the training I do is to teach public safety how to understand the patient that they're going after. And because of that hypersensitivity, those with autism are calmed and soothed by being in water. That kind of reduces the sensation. And that girl I was telling you about that had to get her clothes out right away, she liked being in water, but she liked to go deep because the pressure on her ears dulled the sound. And her mother took her to the circus one time. The kid just went nuts. There's so much sound and bright lights and all this stuff. She just curled up in a ball in her chair, and it was just painful for her. So, yeah, autism can be a challenge. Okay, so that's what they wear. The range on that transmitter is about 1 mile, It's a radio transmitter that you heard sending out a pulse about once a second. So the range is only about a mile. If I have male teenagers with autism, we have an optional 3-mile transmitter because they're fast and strong and they can cover a lot of ground very fast. So we have a better chance of locating them with that.
Say, Bob,
Yes.
are those paired then to the tracking device?
The frequency band that the FCC has assigned is the 216 megahertz band on the FM band. And there's 216.000 to 216.999, so there's 1,000 different frequencies. On this receiver, I have it tuned at 763, and that's the one that's being passed around. So there's like 1,000 different frequencies you can have. We have way more than 1,000 clients in the country, but with a 1-mile range, you purposely try to space them apart so you're not tracking the wrong one. And if you, in fact, find the wrong person, the recommendation is to cut the band off, take the battery out, stay with them, keep that wrong person safe until they find the one they're after. So yeah, good question. Okay, yeah. Tracking equipment. There's a couple different styles of this, but like I said, this will handle multiple bands, but the FCC, all animal tracking and people tracking is limited to the 216 megahertz band. Used to be on a different band, but they kept selling the frequency bands to other things, and we've had to change all of our Project Lifesaver equipment several years ago to the 216 band. But yeah, we can tune this to whatever the client is. And the key part of the training is understanding how to use this. Thanks, Art. I'd say the signal's stronger when you're looking right at it. Turn the volume up a little bit here. And when it's weaker when you're away, but let's see if I can get that to show up better.
What's the distance?
1 mile is the maximum range on that one. And I'm also certified to use a state patrol, to be in that state patrol helicopter. And from the air, we can get 5 to 7 miles out of that 1 mile transmitter. And the neat thing about radio tracking is that it points right at the transmitter. Hopefully the person is wearing it. They haven't cut it off, but you'll find the transmitter. And that works in all axes. So if he's not on this floor, you'll know that you get stronger signal on a different level. So, and GPS won't help with that. So that's why this just plain works. And in fact, when I train a public safety agency, my goal is when we're out doing field exercises is that somebody in the course of doing this will say, hey, this is fun, because it just plain works. And that's what they realize. Once they get the feel for how to use the equipment, and they had to find me, and I'm sneaky, because their clients are going to be sneaky. When they find me, they say, wow. Yeah, I can tell you lots of stories about some of the sneaky stuff I've done. But yeah, that's once they realize how effective it is, then it is fun because it works and it's fast. Okay, a little bit more about what they do. When someone goes missing, the program is implemented by a public safety agency. So you call 911 and say that this client is missing. And if they're in their home turf, dispatch should already have their picture, their name, address, and what the frequency of their transmitter is. So that goes out. When I worked for Ramsey County Sheriff, they would broadcast on all channels that there's a Project Lifesaver search, the name of the client, and the frequency. And then everybody who has tracking equipment can tune to that frequency and head there. And when we do that, We have a magnet omnidirectional antenna that goes on the top of the squad, and we disconnect this antenna that's on here and plug that antenna into here, into the receiver, tune to their frequency and turn it on as soon as we start heading in the direction. And because there's a reasonable chance you're going to pass them on your way to that last known location. I can share that I've been involved in many searches, but most of the time, 95% of the time, they find the person before I even get there. So, and that's good. That's what we want. Couple cases though, I was instrumental, but I never tracked the person down. All I did was, like in St. Paul, there was a teenage boy, fast, with autism. He lived near University and Dale. And I was patrolling North Oaks on the north end, heard the call go out. Put my antenna on the top, tuned to his frequency, and got on the radio and said I'm responding, and headed in that direction. It was a Saturday in the fall. There was still road construction, there was events going on, and I'm not a sworn officer, so I can't go code 3, I can't go lights and siren. I have to go with traffic, so I'm trying to plan my route to get there. Well, anyway, from North Oaks, I went down Rice to Highway 36 and headed west to Rice, or Dale, and headed south. And all of a sudden, I had strong signal coming through. Pulled over right there, got on St. Paul's frequency, identified Ramsey County Squad 2616, responding to the Project Lifesaver. And I said, I'm at Maryland and Dale, and I have strong signal. Dispatch came back, you mean Dale and Aurora? Because they had some false signals down further south. I said, negative, Maryland and Dale. And I said, I'll give you a direction in about 90 seconds. Because I had to disconnect the on the antenna, switch to the directional antenna. And even before I could get a direction, police squads were converging on the area, and one of them got on the radio and said, there he is. And I did have to help corner him because he was a fast kid. And he was going around the lake, and they asked me to get ahead of him. And well, he went out on a fishing pier out on the lake, and the St. Paul officer said, I don't want to get wet today. Knowing that he had autism and they like to go in water. So we talked him into the squad, and he got saved there. So I never actually found him directly myself, but I got people in the right area. Another case where, let's see, we have a client that was in northeastern part of Ramsey County in White Bear Township, and he went missing. And what I heard was, well, I was at the patrol station in Arden Hills, and I heard the call go out, so I grabbed my gear and got in the squad and started heading in that direction, but tuned to his frequency. And I also knew where he liked to go before, so I was changing my path to go where he liked to go in the past. But I heard that the last time his family saw him, he was hydrocephalic, by the way. It was about 1 a.m. when they all went to bed, and this was 8 a.m. They have no idea when in the night he snuck out. So he could have been gone quite a while. And a motivated person can cover a lot of ground. And if the range is only a mile, we've got work to do. So I was on my way toward his home, and the deputy in charge of the search called me on my phone and asked how they can help me. And I said, well, if he's been gone that many hours, he could be a ways away. We may need to get the State Patrol helicopter and get more range on the search. But as soon as I said that, I said, oh, wait a second, I have signal. Because I started picking up those chirps. And I pulled over right there on Highway 61. I said, I'm on Highway 61 and whatever the cross street was. And I said, he's within a quarter mile of me right now. So now these deputies that were all over the area searching, they start heading to that area. And I said, give me a couple minutes and I'll give you a direction. I switched to the directional antenna and said, okay, he's west-southwest of me from right here. And Within 90 seconds, again, the deputy said, got him. He was across Highway 61. There's railroad tracks there in White Bear Lake. Past the railroad tracks, past the row of trees in a subdivision that was on the other side. So I never tracked him down myself, but got people in the right area. So that's powerfully good stuff. Okay. So yeah, like I said, I didn't bring the whip antenna down, on the antenna, but I said the range on that's only a quarter mile because it's not directional. Directional antenna really looks for weak signal. The Omni is just looking for signal in the area. So squad cars can cover a lot of territory looking for the person. But like I say, once you got signal, the search is virtually over because you know you're within a quarter mile with the other antenna and then quickly track them down. Okay. So I was just explaining how a search works. It is public safety that's trained to do this, and sworn officers do have lights and siren they can use to go at speed, knowing that this can be a big deal. Because one of the other characteristics of a lot of people with autism is that they don't understand the concept of danger. And so running across a busy highway, no big deal. And that's scary. So you gotta find them quickly. Heading for water. The most common cause of death for those with autism, kids with autism, is drowning by far. So they just head for water. It's so calming and soothing. There was a girl in Arden Hills that my commander found before she was on Project Lifesaver. She took off from home and they found her clothes by a pond. She evidently got in the pond, but the water was cold. So she got out and headed, I think they headed east, and I think they picked her up around Lexington, south of 96 of it. So, yeah. So it's challenging, but you do have to find people quickly. Okay. Let's see. I have a couple of news stories that talk about this, and from 2007. That goes back a ways. In fact, I'll let the story show itself, and then we'll see if we got enough volume here.
The city of New Brighton is having some success with a new tracking system designed to locate vulnerable people. It's called Project Lifesaver, and Carolyn's Julianne Olson shows us tonight how it works.
I didn't sleep much last night.
Bob Parrott took it hard. The news about 5-year-old Kaylee Dickerson.
It's just devastating.
Dickerson had autism. She wandered away from her home in Blaine yesterday. 2 hours later, her body was found in a nearby pond.
To think that if we would have gotten the word out, could have helped.
It is a radio tracking system called Project Lifesaver. Parrott helped New Brighton raise money to buy it. Project Lifesaver is designed to help people with Alzheimer's or autism.
It's essentially bear tracking technology.
They wear a transmitter bracelet on their wrist,
The stronger you hear that chirp,
so if they wander away,
the closer you know you're getting.
police can use an antenna to track them down in minutes.
It's old, but it's reliable technology.
I watch them very carefully.
Lorraine Nelson is getting a transmitter bracelet for her husband, Arlen.
Locking the doors doesn't work real well because he gets very upset, which is the nature of Alzheimer's.
Arlen's face shows what happened after he escaped 2 days ago.
He fell flat on his face on the cement.
The Nelsons live in New Brighton, so far the only city in the metro with Project Lifesaver. Bob Parrott is hoping to change that.
And unfortunately, tragedy like yesterday, is a reason to spread the word even more.
Parrott says he'll never know if Project Lifesaver could have helped Kaylee Dickerson, but he says he does know it can help find people fast. It costs New Brighton about $6,000 to implement, and then users like the Nelsons pay a $10 monthly fee. Only 4 outstate counties in Minnesota are now using the system, and there are states like New Jersey and Colorado that have plans to use the system statewide.
A little bit else.
That's right.
Thanks, Julie.
Okay. That was 2007. Things have changed in the meantime, but yeah, that was tough. it's hard for me to watch. But that night, I was up all night sending in news tips to the 4 local stations. I had to schedule appointments with 3 of them responded, so we had to space them out. And I'll show you another one that we did there. There's a little, you learn something, but the officer in that was Tony Pacenik. He was the one who coordinated us volunteers in public safety. Gail Christensen was a volunteer in public safety. And I met her when she moved here and then joined BIPS. But yeah, so Tony was here National Night Out because he's now the director of public safety in charge of all the police and fire for New Brighton. But he was really coordinating us volunteers at the time we were trying to implement Project Lifesaver. So he was very involved. In fact, the first agency I trained, he was my helper when we went to Winona County to train the sheriff department there. So yeah. Okay, one more story. It's very similar because it's the same time. I've got a whole bunch of stories. This is the KSTP, but
Yesterday, a 5-year-old Kaylee Dickerson in a pond near her house in Blaine has highlighted some concerns. The child was autistic, and police say despite the security at her house, she managed to get out undetected by her mother. And now police in nearby New Brighton say a small device may have saved that little girl's life. But as Glenn Barber reports, not enough people know about it.
Following yesterday's tragic accident in Blaine, authorities want more people to know about a potentially life-saving program that's as simple as wearing a little wristband like this.
Bob Parrott is a volunteer in public safety. He's showing how a radio tracking system called Project Lifesaver works.
Yeah, you can hear the signal strength.
Parrott understands the value of something like this. He often worried that his father, who suffered from dementia, would wander away from home.
It's constant anxiety. You have to be vigilant day and night. You have to sleep with one eye and one ear open.
For $10 a month, this may give some peace of mind to the families of people who suffer from mental illness and to the parents of autistic children.
Transmission is increasing here.
When someone goes missing, call 911. First responders then track the wristband using an antenna. Signals come in from up to a mile away. There have been 1,500 successful searches around the country, taking less than 30 minutes.
No, we're right on top of it. The search, the national average for a foot search of 8 hours down to 30 minutes or less. You know, this will definitely save lives with this type of equipment and technology.
Just a few Minnesota agencies use this technology now, but Parrott hopes to change that.
Knowing that if something slips up, they have something to fall back on.
Law enforcement agencies have to administer Project Lifesaver for privacy and search and rescue reasons. It costs about $5,000 to $12,000 to start up a new program, and safety advocates say that's a small price to pay. Reporting in New Brighton, I'm Bill Arbor, 5 Witness News.
yeah, it's the same story, and there are other stories. I was trying to find one that was just a demo search we did for a TV station out of the public safety building, but couldn't find that. That's old stuff again, going back in time. Okay, so it's in the news. They talked about there weren't many places in Minnesota that have it. Well, right now there's about 40 agencies that do. And the sad reality is that I've trained Hennepin County, Ramsey County, St. Paul Police, Anoka County, Washington County, most of the metro. And what I've learned is that, okay, these are big agencies, and the person in charge gets rotated to a different assignment. And a new person comes in and gets stuck with this program they know nothing about, and they shut it down. So Hennepin County now no longer has it, Ramsey County doesn't, Washington County's on a similar one, but not the same. Anoka County's gone, so that's frustrating. And in Ramsey County, I was hired in 2009, as a part-time temp to implement the program countywide. So that meant I could work up to 30 hours a week for up to 6 months. And so 2009, June through November, I got the program stood up, trained, we got policies and procedures in place, and started signing up clients. And then when I was done with my 6 months, I volunteered about 10 hours a week to keep the program going, and then they hired me back in 2010, in June, and we're growing the program. And then come September, they said, would you do us a favor and patrol the city of North Oaks till we hire somebody? So I got rotated out of that role, although I kept doing it on the side. And then that sheriff lost the election that fall, and they weren't going to hire anybody to fill the spot that I was temporarily filling until the new sheriff came on. In the meantime, North Oaks fell in love with Bob, and everybody knew Bob. And so the new sheriff then hired me full-time to patrol North Oaks and do Project Lifesaver on the side. Well, okay, that went on, let's see, in 2015, I realized, okay, I'm getting older. By 2016, I'll have 5 years as a full-time employee with the county. I could now draw a little retirement. So I said, I'm turning 73 at that time in 2016. Time to think about retiring again. So I gave them a year's notice to get somebody up to speed on this. And they immediately said, oh no, we'll just shut the program down. And I wrote letters, and the deputies on the street know how fast it works and how much they like it, but the top manager, no, it's gone. So that was frustrating. And that prompted me to start our nonprofit. And let's see, well, let's talk, before I go into that, let's talk about Project Lifesaver itself. Project Lifesaver, as I said, started in April of '99 by a search and rescue unit out of Chesapeake, Virginia. And they were just so frustrated over not finding their Alzheimer patients that were so close to where they left. And when this tracking equipment was mentioned for other things, they said, can it be adapted to people? And they got it adapted, and they started Project Lifesaver. They are a nonprofit, 501c3, so they're not profit motivated. Their motto is bringing loved ones home, and they really live that. Because when the New Brighton Public Safety Commission asked us volunteers, would anybody be willing to help look into this program called Project Lifesaver, I was gullible, I put my hand up. And then once I realized what it was, and my dad, who had died just over a year earlier, could have used that, because he did take off. And so I could appreciate what value it brought. And I also, at that time, was a quality consultant in non-manufacturing type quality. And the product I sold and consulted on was creating a customer-centered culture. So when I talked to Project Lifesaver, I could hear between the words that they were a very high-quality organization. They really lived that motto of bringing loved ones home. And without saying it, they were saying, how can we help your agency be successful with this program? And and in fact, I said, okay, what's the competition out there? And they told me, and they said, here's the issues with each of them. I said, okay, and I could verify that. We'll talk about that briefly. But anyway, Project Lifesaver International is, I say a nonprofit. They do not manufacture the equipment. They find who has the best out there, and they've changed equipment manufacturers at least 3 times. I think it may be 4, actually. And the companies that made the old equipment, they said, well, we got this stuff, what are we gonna do? Let's start our own program. So they start their own program. And they're out there, but they're a for-profit company. And so they cut corners. They figured, okay, we can sell more of this, make more money if we get it more widely distributed. So they're cutting corners. Well, I know some exist in Ramsey County, and I'm aware of 2 searches that the technology didn't work. And the same equipment that Project Lifesaver used, and they had 100% success. So what's the difference? They cut corners on training, policies, and procedures. So Project Lifesaver was tuning what they're doing to almost guarantee success. there's no official guarantee, but in 26 and a half years, there hasn't been a failure. And there's been over 4,400 searches, 100% successful, average search time 30 minutes, and no serious injuries, let alone deaths. So there's nothing else out there that can say that. I have people call me and say, well, I've tried this, and it just doesn't work in this case. Or they describe something else that, you know, they have to take it off to charge it, and they do it at night. Well, that's when the kid takes off, or all these different things. And so, yeah. Anyway, that's what that is. Let me talk about my organization. When I left Ramsey County and they had shut the program down, I decided we need to start our own organization, Project Lifesaver Minnesota Support Center. And our job then is to help agencies start the program and help keep it going. And despite changing roles in the organization, we'll help keep it going. And we also help get the word out and stuff like that. Well, then the pandemic came along, and nobody wanted to go in anybody's house. Nobody wanted, and my volunteers sort of evaporated. So things kind of went into tread water mode. And yeah, it was just in the last few weeks I gave notice at church that I'm resigning because I have to spend more time on Project Lifesaver. I figured God was sending me messages. You gotta get out. There were like 5 different things that happened in a very short time. And I think the 4th one in sequence was a news story that was on about a family that went camping in Pine County. That was just a few weeks ago. And one of their kids is a Project Lifesaver client. And he took off from camp in the wilderness and was missing. And it was on the news that night. It took like 20 minutes for the deputies there to find him and get him back home and in the middle of the wilderness. And I realized, okay, Project Lifesaver hasn't been on the news locally in many years. I mean, I haven't been pushing it to get on the news. And for it to be on the news, that's another sign that I gotta get busy with it again. And then that same day and the next day I was getting emails from people asking about Project Lifesaver. I thought, well, maybe the news stirred that up. Well, one of them was from Duluth and one was from very southern Minnesota. And not sure they saw the news story, but, and the next day you get more. So I've got work to do. But yeah, we've existed for quite a while now, and now you gotta get serious with it. Okay, so one of the questions was, what else is out there? There are other things out there. People say, well, you can track a phone, you can track all this. Yes, but the phone has to be on, has to be charged, and has to be with the person. Or you can have other devices that are with them. Trouble is they're easy to remove or not be with the person. And they only, if they're GPS, like I say, they won't tell you where in a building they are. And a lot of searches, part of the reason the search time is down to 30 minutes is that they said, turn off, we can't find it. And you start tracking and it's pointing at the house. Oh, maybe they're the other side. You go around the other side up, pointing back at the house. Back in the house, and you find the kid has crawled in the closet underneath stuff or under the couch where they never looked or something. So we find it. In fact, I've had some searches that those with autism, when they starting out, they find a way to cut the band off. And then we have to go find the transmitter. So we use the tracking stuff, find the transmitter, put it back on. When we put it back on somebody with autism, we just remind them that it's to help keep them safe. And then they get used to it being there. And now, when you go to change the battery, cut the band off, you're a little bit on edge because it's not there. And so the opposite is happening. So you quickly change the battery, get it back on, and they're calm again. So, but yeah, there are a lot of things out there. And like I say, when I first was researching this, New Brighton asked us volunteers to find out, does New Brighton have a need for this program? And we quickly realized, okay, the aging population, we're gonna have more dementia. And the incidence of autism is going up. And yes, we got multiple reasons for this to be in place. And then the second question was, is that the best answer for that problem? And so when I asked Project Lifesaver, what else is there? And they ticked off a whole list of these other things out there. And they said, here's what to look for on each of them, what the problems are. And you can research and find out, oh yeah, that's a problem. And the key is that, you gotta have this with them all the time, because you never know when. And most of them, they have to be off for charging, or they're just removable. It's part of their clothing, or it's in their shoelaces, or whatever. They have shoes that you can track. But if they're not wearing the shoes, or they take the clothes off to go in the pond. Anyway, so this is really, really the gold standard. Okay, let me ask you, are there questions that people have from what I've been saying? So I have one more slide to deal with. Yes?
How does a family qualify to be in that program?
Good question. Okay. To qualify, there has to be an agency in their area that has the program, for one. But they do have to have some diagnosis that says they are at risk. And it's fairly easy to get that diagnosed. They may not even have they may have an undefined condition that causes them to take off or whatever, and that works. The other main condition is that someone has to be with them at all times to notice when they're gone. So they can't be someone that's living alone. That won't work, because they could be gone for days and nobody would notice. So that's the other major restriction there. But otherwise, the goal is to get people on the program before they go missing.
So do they have to be, I'll say certified by a physician or a school system? Who makes the decision?
Usually if it's a child or someone, they have their diagnosis down. They know it, and it's obvious that, okay, it's clearly diagnosed. And when you see the individual, you can see the characteristics. There was in fact, Ramsey County Sheriff's first client was the subject of a video I didn't show, news story. He, in 2008, he was a 25-year-old man with autism, lived in a group home in Shoreview, right across the street from North Oaks. He went to a special needs camp near Grantsburg, Wisconsin. And that first day he was there for a week, he got confused and walked away. And a search started. And that search involved, because his mom was in the special ed network, she was a teacher and had quite a network, volunteers from the Twin Cities, total like 350 a day, went to help search for him. They searched the whole week, didn't find him. And it was the Sunday he went there. The following Sunday, the sheriff told the parents, he said, I'm sorry, I can't find your son. Because that day they had over 600 volunteers on a Sunday, on a weekend. And they used helicopters and canoes, kayaks, horseback, all these ways to search this wilderness type area, and they couldn't find him. And that was June 22nd, 2008. And June 21st, what day is that on the calendar? It's summer solstice. It's first day of summer. And a characteristic of the first day of summer is lots of daylight. So one of these teams, it was actually firefighters from St. Paul, team of firefighters, said, we still got daylight, we're gonna go out one more time. Well, that team happened to stumble on him. He was naked, curled up in the fetal position in waist-high, very dense brush. I mean, you virtually had to step on him to find him. The helicopters could not see from the air through that stuff. Even with FLIR, the forward-looking infrared, the animals showed up more than a person. So they found him barely alive. The sheriff was saying that it gets cold at night then, and he just couldn't survive more than that. So he did survive, and he had a kidney transplant, but not having his anti-rejection meds for a week. Eventually he rejected that kidney years later, but he did get another transplant. So, and I still change his battery and his transmitter. So he lives in a group home, and group home staff changes so much that I figured, okay, I'll do the battery change. So every 2 months I go there. And in between I go by there with the tracking stuff to make sure it's still working. So yeah, that was quite a story. I contacted, they mentioned his dad was an attorney, so I was able to do a little detective work and find out, okay, his last name was Kennedy, so I found that Kennedy in Roseville, that was an attorney, and I wrote to him saying, hey, if something good could come from this, is getting the word out, and they responded, and now Keith's mom is on my board, so yeah. So neat things have come from that. Okay, so the last thing I should mention, okay, what can you do now that you know about this? Right now in the metro area, New Brighton has the program. So anybody in New Brighton that is a candidate could sign up. And what New Brighton does is they just point it to me and I have to do the sign up and stuff. But the Lino Lakes has it, and I think Woodbury has it. And that's the only thing nearby. There are counties outstate. There's, like I say, 40 agencies around that have it. But Anoka quit, Hennepin quit, Ramsey County quit, and yeah, so we got to get them going. So what I do when people contact me now, I say, well, my recommendation is to write a letter to the chief of your public safety. It could be police chief. The county sheriff is good because that would cover the whole county. But you need to write it as a resident, a taxpayer, and voter with a need for this program. And I explain that, okay, if who you're writing the letter to also had somebody with a condition like this, would you want them to have a system that is better than nothing? Or one that hasn't failed in 26 and a half years from even despite widespread use? So some years ago I was asked to speak to the county commissioners in Renville County, Olivia, Minnesota. Before I went in to speak to them, I asked what prompted this. And I was asking the chief deputy at the time. And he said, well, in like 1 week's time, we got about 6 letters from people saying that we should look into this program. I said, oh, when was that? And he gave me the week. That was just about 1 week after an autism walk. And I had a booth there. And I asked people, my hope to get people to talk to me was, what county are you in? And they tell me, oh, sorry, you don't have Project Lifesaver. I said, what's Project Lifesaver? Oh, I'm glad you asked. And here's a sample letter you can write. I said, handwrite it and make sure your return address is on the envelope so they know it's from a resident. And so, yeah, Renville County started the program. Years ago, when I trained them, they had the whole sheriff department come in, tiny sheriff department, maybe 12 deputies. All 3 shifts were in for the training. And so they had overtime for those guys. And that program's going strong there because everybody knows, no matter who gets rotated in the assignment, they're still going. The problem we have in these bigger departments where not everybody knows about it or understands the value or the need. So, yeah, so I hand out sample letters. So that, you know, so if you know somebody, and most people know somebody, and if you don't think you know anybody now, I bet you're going to run across somebody soon now that you're tuned in to what we're talking about here. So they need to look into it in their area. If they're in New Brighton, they're going to be pointed to me. If they're not, then they have to check with their own public safety people and maybe write a letter. And I can email them a sample letter. So have them contact me. And I've got brochures I can pass around and my business card. So, yeah, but getting the word out. Kaylee Dickerson was really, a 5-year-old, and I didn't pick a news story that had her picture on there. I don't like looking at that. It's a tough reminder of what happened there. And just a year ago, there were 2 boys with autism that drowned in the western part of the metro area at different times. And they would have been candidates for the program. The program wasn't there, so. Okay, any other questions I can answer? I'll pass out the brochures and pass these around. Yeah.
How's the church going to get along without you?
I'm leaving on vacation and won't be there this week. That's a part of the test. But I start training on Monday. But yeah, that's not easy. I was. You got those.
You said that you're retiring from that, but now how much time are you going to put in a week for this project, do you think?
Well, as much as I can.
Really?
Yeah.
It's like a full-time job?
Right. The reason I'm leaving church is because I need to focus here. It's just, there's too much need. Got some coming.
Losing a child.
I mean, when I was involved earlier on, we did a lot, and there's a lot that can be done, so we have experience at doing that. Now we just have to get serious with it again.
I can see what you mean about a change in the government workers like Ramsey County, Hennepin County, a new sheriff. You work really hard to get something implemented, and it falls apart with new people. So you have to be constantly educating the new people that come on board.
Right. And that's what I see our role of my organization is helping with, just to keep continuity going. And I've spoken to the Sheriff's Association when they have their conference twice a year. I've had a booth and done speaking there. And there was a news story about near St. Cloud. A farmer was arrested because he changed his wife to a chair. And people, around that time I was doing a talk, I think at church, on Project Lifesaver. People asked me, what about that? And I said, well, most of the people I know use rope. You're trying to keep them safe. And when I was speaking at the sheriff's conference around that time frame in St. Cloud, the sheriff happened to be ducking out when I was done with my talk, and I had to wait to gather up my equipment until the break in the sessions. But that sheriff came out to take a call, and he said how he wasn't reachable the weekend that farmer got arrested. He said he knew the situation there, and he would have told his deputies, don't do that, because he's doing what he has to do his charge to keep him safe. I've heard stories of people that with dementia, they'll tie a rope around the waist of their spouse and then around their wrist. So if the spouse gets up, they know about it. And I can go on and on with stories about my wife. And like one time she brought me her glasses and said, "How can you get this stuff off the lens?" Well, she put clear nail polish on plastic lenses of her glasses. And that's not coming off. And I don't blame her, because that's her brain, her condition. But somebody upstairs was looking out for us, because she couldn't find her good glasses. Those are old glasses. So, yeah. But yeah, I've got many stories like that I can tell personally. But yeah, it came a time when I knew it was really tough for her to be home, and I had asked the our doctor what's appropriate for her at this stage. And the doctor had her evaluated by occupational therapy, and which was like 4 hours of testing, 2 hours at a time on 2 different days. And their conclusion was she couldn't be left alone for a minute because she just wouldn't know how to call for help. She wouldn't, she could get into any kinds of things at home. I mean, if she got up there in the night to go to the bathroom, somebody had to be in there with her because there's meds and other stuff in there, or in the kitchen with the stove. And I brought her here that first year I was here. She was living in memory care. And then when I take her home, she'd be very confused about what it was like to get back in memory care. And I kind of quickly realized it's not a good idea to change her routine. And I took her on vacation. I went on vacation to a timeshare. I had to turn off the circuit breakers to appliances and stuff, and keep an ear open for her to get up and stuff. So it was not a vacation. So. And then when she went back, again, her routine was disrupted. In fact, the first time, she went into memory care in June of 2020 during the pandemic, when it was really hard to visit. But in November, around her birthday, in fact, yesterday would have been her birthday, we had a week of timeshare. And so I took her anyway. And then when she came back, because there weren't vaccines yet and stuff, she had to be in quarantine for 2 weeks, which we knew that ahead of time. We kind of had fun on that vacation, but when I was bringing her back, it was raining and going to Brightondale up there buying Cup. She said, "I'm not going back to that place." Well, okay. I went into the underground parking, got her stuff up, put it in a grocery cart, went up to the 3rd floor to her unit, opened the door, and as soon as I opened the door, she said, "Oh, now I'm home." So, yeah, so that was home. I mean, she really saw that as home, and they did a good job with her there. So, but she was a client. I mean, I had the transfer on her when she was at home. I had in October, in fact, I had to run to church just briefly to turn on technology for trunk or treat. They had stuff going on inside and outside, and came home and she wasn't there. And you know, I checked her on. She has a 2-mile loop that she would walk. And whenever she walked, she took her cell phone and her walker and did that loop. I didn't see her around. We have trees and woods out in the back of our property there. Went out there and looked. She always is in the garden, not there. Turned on the tracking stuff, and I had a faint signal. I said, "Oh, she's a ways away." Went out in front, and you know, part of the training is you always do a